Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Everyone, this is Dan Frakes. Dan is a senior editor at Macworld. As I covered before we hooked up, this has been one crazy week and a half for Dan. And over the past 15 years, he's written and edited books, published software, worked in IT, been a consultant, and had a fancy office as as a public policy analyst. Do you miss that job, Dan?
No. This is a lot more fun.
Anyway, we're really glad you're with us, and we really appreciate you giving us the time. And let's go.
Well, you had, as George and I had spoken on the chat, it's been kind of a crazy week. Originally, I was going to talk a little bit about Mountain Lion, and then we got the big iPhone event, and so now the big thing is iPhone, iOS, new iPods, and so we thought we'd spend most of the time actually just taking some questions and answers, giving some answers on those topics. So, is there anything you want me to do to start out, George?
No, just go ahead. I think start with the iPhone, probably.
Yeah, so some of you have probably read up on it, but if you haven't, the new iPhone was available for order last week, and it's going to be shipping this Friday. So if you were one of the first few people to order it, they sold out of pre-orders in, I think it was an hour. So if you order one now, it's going to take a few weeks or to a month actually to get it. But they're going to be shipping on this Friday. Some stores will have them in stock. And the big news is that it's got a bigger screen, it's faster. It's got a better camera, and it has some neat features like automatic panoramic photos, so you can just sweep the phone across a panorama, and it will actually stitch everything together. Better video recording. You can even you can take pictures while you're recording video now. It's got LTE 4G wireless, so you can get fast cellular data. It's got faster Wi-Fi. Slightly longer battery life, and then of course the big thing for accessories is it's got a new connector called the Lightning connector, which replaces the older 30-pin dock connector. So that's the new iPhone, and it's the same price as the previous ones, as Apple usually does. They keep the same price but just improve the product. And then they also announced a new iPod last week, new iPod Touch, which the new one has the same screen as the iPhone, so it's bigger Retina display. It's got last year the iPod Touch line generally has the previous iPhone's processor. So you've got last year the iPhone 4S, that processor in the new iPod Touch. It's thinner and lighter. It's got better cameras, better video recording. It has Siri now, which the iPod Touch didn't before, and it has video mirroring. So you can show your iPod Touch's screen on your TV through an Apple TV. There we go.
Okay. You were talking about, it was on the iPad, or the iTouch, I think.
Okay, so did I get to the part where I talked about Siri and AirPlay, that it has
Yes.
that now? Okay, so the other big thing is colors, and it's the same price as before. And they're keeping the previous model around, so you can get an iPod Touch for as little as $199 now. And then finally, they did the new iPod Nano, which is kind of an odd product for Apple. Every year they decide to do something completely different for it. Last couple of years, it looked kind of like a little iPod Shuffle with a clip, square. It's now back to the tall, narrow form. It's got a touch screen. Looks kind of like a little iPod Touch, actually, but it doesn't run separate apps. It just has the built-in apps. It has Bluetooth now, which is nice for people who want to exercise with wireless headphones. And it does video again. They dropped video a couple years ago, and now it does video. So those are the new products they released last week. And then, of course, they announced a ship date for iOS 6, which is this Wednesday. So you'll be able to upgrade your older products to iOS 6 starting Wednesday.
What about the connector? Do you have anything to add on that?
Well, we posted a bunch of articles last week about the new products, and I think the one that got the most traffic was the one about the Lightning connector, because they're wondering what's the deal with this, why do they do it, what does it mean for their old accessories. So Apple's had this thin, long 30-pin dock connector on their devices since I think it's 2003 now, when the first iPod with a dock connector came out. So it's been around for 9 years. and it served us well. It's a really capable connector, but it's a little fragile. If any of you have had an iPod Touch or an iPad that has the curved bottom, it can kind of be difficult to get it to connect sometimes, and it can break. And also, Apple's products now are getting smaller and thinner, and that dock connector just didn't fit. It was keeping them from making, for example, the iPod Touch and the iPod Nano smaller. So they did away with that in favor of a new connector called the Lightning connector. And it's instead of 30 pins, it's got 8 connections in it, 8 connector pins. It doesn't do as many things. The old connector had lots of functions on it. This one eliminates some of those. For example, it doesn't do analog audio. So if you've got an old speaker system that had that used analog audio, you'll need an adapter. And in fact, anything that has a dock connector, the old wide dock connector, you'll need an adapter that Apple sells for $29, and that converts the old dock connector to the new one. So it's a bit of a hassle for anybody who has a lot of money invested in older accessories. But the upside of it, is that the phones and the iPods and things can be much smaller. It's a more reliable connector. It's supposed to be sturdier, and it's easier to use. It actually works both directions. You don't have to worry about which side is up and which is down. So I can see why they're doing it, and I can also see why a lot of people are frustrated that they're going to have to buy adapters or new accessories.
So there's no chance that Apple would include the adapter.
That would be nice. I agree. In fact, oddly, if you were one of the first people to buy a new iPhone last, I guess it was early Friday morning, late Thursday night, the website was incorrectly saying that a Lightning to 30-pin adapter was included with the phone. And then a lot of people found out later it wasn't. So it would be a nice gesture. And it would certainly save us some money to not have to buy an adapter. We'll see.
What's the story on the earplugs? The
earpods?
Have you tried them?
I've tried them. They're definitely better than the previous ones. Earbuds they're hard to do right. They're cheap products that are included with everything. It's hard to find ones that fit well and sound good. And the old Apple earbuds were actually, as $20, $30 earbuds go, they weren't bad. The big issue is that they didn't fit a lot of people well, and so if they're not fitting well, they don't sound good. So most people, even if most people they just didn't. I shouldn't say most. Let me back up and say for a lot of people, they didn't fit well enough to give decent sound. And so Apple says they spent 3 years taking molds of hundreds of different people's ears and trying to find a design that would fit most people, not all, but most. And I've tried them a little bit. We had one of our writers reviewed them on Saturday, and we both felt that they definitely felt more comfortable and they didn't fall out as easily. And because they fit a little better, they sounded a little better, especially on the low end. The bass is a lot better. The question is, if you're buying a new iPhone, a new iPod, you're going to get them for free. And for the free, they're a big improvement. The big question is, do you want to go out and spend $30 on a pair instead of maybe $20 more and getting something that's going to sound a lot better? And I think that's really the decision that most people who are thinking about buying them are going to be faced with. There are headphones out there that cost maybe $50 that give you a lot better sound, and so it all depends on how much you want to spend.
Which brand are those?
Excuse me, I got an alert that just popping up here on my screen. We've got, if you go to macworld.com and go to the headphones section, we've got actually a list of our top-rated headphones. We've got one reviewer who focuses on just earbuds, and he's got a lot of reviews for anywhere from $30 up to $400. And there's some from ME Electronics, there's some from Denon, there's some from, I'm trying to remember these off the top of my head, Maximo, that are in the maybe $50 to $60 range that are significantly better.
What about,
but for $29,
did we lose your voice?
No, I'm here.
What about what's going on with Macworld?
Oh, you mean our website, huh?
Yeah, because we haven't seen much activity in the last week or so.
The over the last, this was supposed to start about a week and a half ago, and as projects do, it got delayed. But Macworld has a brand new website as of, I believe, Friday at midnight, last Friday at midnight, and there's a new Macworld website, there's a new PC World website, and we have a third new brand called Tech Hive, which is a third website that we launched all Friday night. So we've all got brand new websites now. Macworld, PC World, and Tech Hive are sister publications, so we're all under the same umbrella, and we all focus on different things. Macworld, as you know, focuses on Apple products, Macs, iPhones, iPods, Apple software. PC World is now going to stick to Windows PCs. And then we've got this third site now called Tech Hive, which is essentially consumer electronics, anything that's not a traditional computer. And they do tablets, they do other smartphones, they do TVs, digital music streamers, anything that falls under the gadget umbrella. So we've now got three brands, three websites, and hopefully the people who are Mac users can now go to Macworld and see just what they want to see there, and then if they want to see other stuff, they can go to Tech Hive or PC World. But as a result of this, is we've got three new websites, and launching a new website doesn't always go as smoothly as you hoped. So we're filing bugs and we're fixing things pretty much all day and night the last few days. So that's the latest on the new sites.
Yeah.
For those of us who subscribe to your Macworld emails, will they start coming back because it's pretty sparse last week?
Did you hear that question?
No, can you repeat it for me?
Basically, those of us that subscribe to the emails and so forth
Sure.
haven't received much in the last week.
They shut down the newsletters for a couple weeks to transition over to the new site, and the new as part of this process, they're redoing all the user databases for newsletters and things like that. So we have not been sending out newsletters for the last about week and a half. So there's nothing wrong with your email. It's coming back.
When do you think it'll be back?
They say this week or early next. That's the latest from the IT folks.
Yeah, because we really utilize the heck out of that and communicate with our group every time we see an article that we think is important for everybody. Are there any questions out in the group?
Yeah, which of the iPod touches will be eligible for iOS 6? Only the most recent one?
So it is. I think I heard your question was which iPod Touch models are compatible with iOS 6,
Yeah.
and I believe it is the fourth generation and later. Although I will say that on a fourth generation, I've heard it's a little slower. So the last year's model and the new ones that are coming out, it should be great. If you've got an older one, a fourth generation, you're right on the cusp of when it's compatible. It's kind of like last year with the iPhone 3GS and iOS 5, where it worked, but it was a little slower.
Does it have the big screen like the iPhone 5?
Does the new iPod Touch have the same big screen?
Yes.
Yeah, the new iPod Touch, the one's coming out next month, has the same 4-inch Retina display as the iPhone 5. And in past years, the iPod Touch had a sort of maybe a step below this in terms of screen quality of the iPhone. Apple says this year is the exact same display, so it should have the same resolution, the same brightness, the same surface, scratch coatings and everything like that on it. So it's supposed to be the exact same display.
Thank you.
Yes. Speak up real loud.
I have a question regarding the new SIM cards of the iPhone 5. Are they the nano SIM card size that was talked about, or what is the new development there?
Yes, as I understand it, the iPhone 5 SIM card is the new nano SIM card. So it's the smaller one, which if you never switch out your SIM card is not an issue. I think the question now is for people who want to take their iPhone and say go overseas with it and buy a prepaid SIM card. The new Nano SIM cards are not as widespread in use in other countries as they are with the iPhone here in the U.S. So that's the challenge. But they are using the Nano SIM card, which is supposed to be ramping up by other companies over the next year or so.
Carl?
I have a mountain lion question. I have a 2007 Mac Pro desktop, and it's got a ATI 5770 video card. Will that run mountain lion?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember my when I wrote all my installation articles on Mountain Lion. As I remember, the Mac Pro, the original Mac Pro was right on the edge. It was either the last one not compatible or the first one that is compatible. And while we're sitting here, I'm going to look that up for you because I had an article on that. If someone else wants to answer a question while I look that up.
Any other question? Yes, Don.
Yeah, the NBC tech reviewer on the Today Show said that the iPhone 5 is great, but if you had a 4S, there was really not any great reason to upgrade. But anything older than that, he said definitely you ought to get the 5. Do you agree with that? Especially if you don't, like myself, I use mostly on Wi-Fi. I don't care about 4G or whatever.
Sure. You know, this is a good question that applies pretty much every year with the iPhone in that if you don't need the latest and greatest, you can go every 2 years and get a new iPhone every 2 years, because if you jump 2 years, it's a huge upgrade. If you jump 1 year, it's a definite improvement, but you're probably okay without it. Compared to the 4S, as I mentioned earlier, it's got the iPhone 5 has a bigger screen. It's faster, so if you use it for things like games, for apps that are processor intensive, like maybe iMovie or something like that, you'll notice those differences. If you use it to take photos a lot, the new camera is supposed to be considerably better, and it's got a little bit longer battery life. But if those things don't matter to you, the iPhone 4S is still it's a great phone, you know. And there's no reason to go out and spend money to buy a 5 just to get those features if you're not going to use them. Especially now that AT&T, which in the past would let you get a fully subsidized next iPhone version within a year. So if you bought the 4 when it came out, you could buy the 4S and still get the subsidized price. This year, AT&T has been really stingy about that, and most people are being told, sorry, you have to go a year and a half before we'll give you the subsidized price. So you're going to have to pay, I think it's like $250 extra to get it right away. So that's another thing to take into consideration as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I noticed it was, I checked my AT&T and it was $7.95 if I bought it now and $5.95 if I waited
Right.
months.
Right.
So I was surprised that it actually, as you get closer, I guess the price comes down.
Yeah, once your eligibility period comes up, then they give you a much better price. Before
Right.
that, they essentially charge you to break your contract. So,
Go ahead, Dan.
oh, I was just going to say, the Mac Pro, the oldest Mac Pro that worked with Lion was the 2007. The oldest Mac Pro that works with Mountain Lion is the early 2008. So for the gentleman who asked about his 2007 Mac Pro, it won't unfortunately work with Mountain Lion.
Now the 2007 would work with Lion?
With Lion, it should work.
Okay,
With
mine was 2006.
And mine works with Lion. 2000,
Right.
2006 works with
Right.
Lion, and that's the end of the line.
Right. But it won't work with Mountain Lion.
Right.
Will it not work at all, or will it?
It won't even let you install it.
Okay.
The installer will check and it'll say, sorry, it doesn't work.
Marilyn.
I have a couple of questions about messages and FaceTime.
Okay.
I just did Mountain Lion, and I have an iPhone and an iPad. And with messages, if I use my Apple, I have an old Apple ID that didn't have a suffix on it. Now sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So when I did messages using the Apple ID with the suffix on it, it came to all of my devices and my Mac through messages. Is that correct? It would come into the messages place, right?
The reason I laughed when you said you were going to ask about messages is because even though it's officially no longer a beta, I think most of us still consider it kind of a beta. It's Apple's trying to do something interesting here in that they're trying to make it so that you don't have IM on your computer and text messages on your phone and you're always having to figure out how to send where. The idea is you can send one message and your replies will all come back to all your devices. That's the theory. In practice, I'm sure many people have discovered it doesn't work that way. I'm actually editing an ebook by Glenn Fleischman, who writes for Macworld but also writes for Tidbits about messages right now. And the editing notes going back and forth between us are enlightening in that one of us will say, can you get this to work? And the other will write back saying, it's supposed to work, but it doesn't. In theory, on each of your devices, you can set up all the addresses and Apple IDs, I should say one Apple ID that is your iMessages ID, and then you can associate usernames with that, meaning additional email addresses, phone numbers, and things like that. If you have the same list set up on all of your devices, the theory is that a message sent to your Apple ID will go to all those devices, even if the person is replying to, say, one of the email addresses associated with that ID rather than the main ID. There's all kinds of weird things that go on. For example, sometimes if someone sends you a message and it shows up on your phone and your computer and your iPad, if you answer on your iPad, none of the subsequent messages will go to any of your other devices, so they only go to the iPad. And so it's really a mess right now. Apple's got the right idea here, but unfortunately I can't give you an exact answer to here's what to do to make it work the way it should.
Okay, well, I got the message because I haven't been working on the replies yet. Now, what about the original iChat name that you had? Is that gone now?
So if it's a username without an @ sign, without an @ domain, so say my username was originally Dan Frakes, and now I've got one that's Dan Frakes at Apple or Mac.com or something. The original one that doesn't have the @ sign will work in messages as an AOL Instant Messenger ID, but it won't work as a messages ID or an iMessage ID. An iMessage ID has to be an email address because it has to be a full Apple ID with an @ sign. You can then associate the old AIM name with your Apple ID, but again, this is where we're kind of getting into the messy thing where they haven't quite settled on how they want to do it.
Okay, so
I wish I had a better answer.
Okay, a follow-up on that.
Yeah, sorry, I wish I had a better answer for that one, but we're still figuring it out too.
Now on FaceTime, I keep getting these messages from Apple telling me that my FaceTime ID is my name without the @ sign on my iPad and my Mac, but on my iPhone, it's with the @ sign.
Huh. I haven't come across that, but maybe it's because I've set it up with, I set up my iCloud ID and then associated everything with my iCloud ID, which is an @mac.com address. And I made sure I set it up the same on all three. So what you might want to do is delete the accounts from all of your devices and then log into all of them using one single Apple ID with the whatever.
So I would delete all the FaceTime accounts, and then I could put in the one with the @ sign for all three.
For all three. And then you should be able to, if you have other ones that you want to be able to receive FaceTime calls at, you can go into the setting. It's on the FaceTime screen in settings on the iPhone, and the same corresponding place on your Mac in the FaceTime app. And there's a section that says also receive calls at, and you can add other email addresses and phone numbers and things in there. But as long as the master Apple ID is the same on all of them, it should work on all of them.
Okay, so to get that, I would delete the accounts and reinstall them. Okay, now when I use the messages, if I send it through a different email address, it comes in on my email, not on my messages. So if I had FaceTime, I probably wouldn't want to use a different email address, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the easiest way to do this is to just tell all of your friends and acquaintances, give them all one particular email address to use, or Apple ID to use as your FaceTime ID, because then they're all going to contact you at the same one. That's the easiest way, and you don't have to worry about whether, some of your devices are going to have one and some the other.
Okay, and last question.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the difference between sending through iMessage, SMS, and SMM.
And MMS?
Yeah, whatever.
Right. Right. SMS and MMS. The only difference between them is that MMS is what's used if you attach images or video or some kind of file, but otherwise they're functionally the same. iMessage versus SMS. The main difference here is that when you send an SMS, it goes through your cellular carrier as a text message, and so that's handled pretty much entirely by your AT&T or Verizon or whatever your cellular carrier is. iMessage is Apple's messaging service, and so when you send that, it goes to Apple's servers, and then Apple finds wherever the recipient is and then sends it to them. Where it gets a little messy is that there's a setting on your phone and in messages on the Mac that will let it revert. Oh, excuse me. Let me back up. There's a setting on your phone, not on your Mac, where if you try to send an iMessage and the iMessage server isn't available for whatever reason, maybe you don't have an internet connection, then it will revert to SMS and be sent to your carrier. So that is that happens on your phone. So there's a fallback. The other thing that's kind of confusing here is that if you're using messages on your Mac, some of your accounts some of the people you converse with may have, say, an AOL Instant Messenger, an AIM account, and some may have an iMessage account, and someone can have both. And depending on how they message you as iMessage or AIM, your reply may be one or the other as well. So that's why sometimes you'll see in messages on your Mac, some messages will be blue and some will be green. The blue ones are AOL Instant Messenger, Google Talk, whatever your normal messaging service is. The green messages are sent through iMessage. So this kind of gets back to where I was talking about before, in that the whole iMessage idea and messages theory, it's neat in concept, but it's a little confusing sometimes. So did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I guess I'll follow up with when it goes through your carrier.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to have AT&T, which does have messaging service on it.
Sure.
Charged against your data plan? Because
It's charging.
I don't have a texting plan with them. I only have a data plan.
So usually what happens on most carriers, AT&T, Verizon, they have separate data and text messaging. And if you don't have a text messaging plan, what happens is either messages don't go through, or they charge you a per message fee, which is some crazy amount, like 40 or 45 cents per message. So if you don't have a text messaging plan, that would be a good reason on your phone to change that setting where it doesn't try to send messages as SMS. And I believe that's in the messages screen of the settings app on your iPhone. The setting is.
It doesn't charge your data plan. It charges.
No. It text messages, SMS messages are separate. They usually use a text messaging plan. iMessage messages, the ones that go through Apple service, those go through your data plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Mitch.
yeah, while you're on iMessage, what's the whole point of having iMessage? What was Apple's thinking? Because, I mean, they talk about, well, this is going to do away with using text messaging through your provider, but it doesn't, because you got all these people out there with Androids and other devices that you still have to have a text message plan. Is there some master plan in the background that eventually it's all going to work on iMessage? Or what's the whole point of iMessage if it doesn't do away with it?
No, it's a good question. It's I think Apple's grand vision of this was that people are so annoyed that they're being charged so much money for what's essentially cost the carriers nothing. Someone did a study a couple years ago saying that the average text messenger costs AT&T something like 1/10000000th of a cent or something crazy like that, and yet they're charging 40 cents a piece or $30 for unlimited, something like that. So the idea was that they dislike paying for text messages so much that they would love to have something that's quote unquote free. But you're right. The big limitation here is that iMessage works only with other Apple users, people on iPhones, people on the Mac, people on iPod Touch. And so if you're conversing with people who are on Androids or who are on some other platform that doesn't support iMessage, it doesn't work. So that's where we get into this mess where things can fall back to SMS if the other person isn't using iMessage. And so the main point, I guess, would be that for all those people that are using an iPhone or a Mac, iMessage works. It's free. Whatever. You have a data plan, but it's negligible data, and it will go to all their devices. And so that's how I use it. I use it whenever the person on the other end is a Mac user or an iOS user, and then I use SMS for other people.
Yeah, I use it too. It didn't get away with my.
Well, my only friends are Apple people, so that's how I solved it.
I wish that were the case with all of mine.
Right.
One of the questions that I had was the Airs, the MacBook Airs. It looks like Apple's pushing and pushing and pushing in that direction. What is your thought on what's going on? Is that going to be the major movement of Apple in the future?
Well, I think the basics of what makes an Air, which is the one piece, solid design, solid state memory, so there's no moving parts. I think those are definitely the trends that Apple is looking at here. It's a little pricey at the beginning, especially as we're waiting for the price of solid state memory to come down. But you end up with a more durable product that doesn't need as many repairs. And it is faster. A lot of the performance, when the original MacBook Airs came out, they used not only hard drives, but they used iPod hard drives, essentially, these tiny little 1.8-inch traditional hard drives, and they were slow. And the MacBook Air, the speed of the processors has gotten faster over the last, 5 years. But what's really made the whole thing faster is that it's using solid state memory. Both the hard drive and the RAM, everything is basically right on the motherboard, and so it's much faster for that. And I think that's where Apple sees us going, is integrate everything, use solid state memory, the number of repairs go down, the performance goes up. The downside, of course, is that the big criticism of the Airs is you can't upgrade them, right? Once you buy it, it's an appliance. You can't get a bigger hard drive. You can't add more RAM. And you can't replace the battery easily. And so that's the Apple trade-off right now. And I think you see it in pretty much all their devices, whether it's the iPhone or the iPad or the MacBook Air. And even, the iMac has still let you upgrade, but it's not as easy to upgrade as some of the older models. So I definitely think this is the direction we're going in terms of the type of components and the type of design. I think whether it's a good thing or not depends on your point of view. People who like to upgrade, they're not happy about it. People who want to buy something and have it just work and not worry about it again are fine with it.
We have one more question here.
I have two unrelated questions. I've heard that the MacBook solid state memory has a limited duty cycle. After so many thousand cycles, it begins to fail. Is that correct or not?
Could you repeat that? I couldn't hear it, George.
Come up a little bit.
The duty cycle of the solid state memories that after certain thousands of cycles, it begins to fail. Is that correct?
You know, that was definitely the case on early solid state drives, SSDs. They definitely had a limited number of cycles, and after that, they would start to have problems. Some of the sectors would go bad. You could lose data. That seems to have improved dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. I think we're at the point now where most of these SSDs or solid state drives, and especially the solid state memory that Apple uses, which is essentially part of the motherboard, it has gotten reliable enough now where it's more than likely going to outlive the computer itself. I haven't seen too many reports over the last few years of failures of these types of memory. So I think we're out of the woods in that respect. And you're right, that was the big concern with SSDs originally.
Second question is, when is the new iMac coming out and what will it be like?
That's a good question, actually. We were wondering the same thing. Contrary to popular belief, we don't work with Apple, and they don't tell us new stuff whenever we ask. We have the same we hear the same rumors as everyone else. There have been a lot of rumors that Apple's going to come out with some new iMacs next month in October. I think those sound plausible. It's been a while. The iMac is overdue, and I'm sure they'd love to get them out for the holidays. As for what they're going to be like, I've heard some rumors about the new Retina displays, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'd love to be wrong, but the cost of Retina displays is still really high to be able to put them on an iMac, especially at 27 inches. I mean, that's huge. I think we'll probably see faster processors. We might see Apple move to solid state memory, or at least as an option rather than as an add-on. For some of the iMacs now, you can build them to order with SSDs. I think we'll see a little more of that. And who knows? At some point, the other shoe's going to drop, and Apple's going to stop putting optical drives in these things. That seems to be their new thing. So I hope that's not the case yet, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Carl?
Yes. How important is it to run down the battery in your iDevices before you recharge?
In terms of, there's two issues here. One is the old issue of memory effect, which isn't an issue anymore. There used to be a problem where batteries, if you only ran them down to say 50% every time you charged them, eventually they would think that they only had a half of the battery as their full charge level. And that memory effect meant that your batteries would only last half as long after a while. That's no longer the case with today's batteries, but the way the batteries in most Apple products work today is that there's actually some circuitry inside that tracks your usage. It just watches to see how long your battery has lasted, how often you charge it, et cetera, et cetera. And Apple recommends I think this might be a little overkill, but Apple recommends once a month running your battery all the way down till it's dead and then charging it fully, just to sort of give that circuitry kind of reset its baseline, just say, hey, this is what my battery can really do, so that it gives you more accurate readings. And that's not going to make your battery last any longer. What it is going to do is it's going to mean that the estimate you get in the menu bar of your Mac or the status bar of your iPad or your iPhone is going to be a little more accurate. And so Apple recommends once a month. I personally don't do it that often. I kind of do it whenever I remember, which is probably every few months. But it's a good idea to do it once in a while.
One question on the storage capacity of the new iPhone. Are there any parameters that you would suggest that one should apply when selecting either 16, 32, or 64 gigabytes?
I mean, the short answer is buy it based on what you use your iPhone for. The longer answer is that if you mainly use your iPhone just for phone calls and basic apps, the 16 gigabyte is plenty. My wife has a 15 gigabyte iPhone 4S, and she's never come close to even half filling it up. On the other hand, I have a few hundred apps, and I put a lot of music on it. I take a lot of pictures with it, and so I have a 64, and it's been comfortable for me. I think 32 is probably the sweet spot for most people. That'll hold a few movies, it'll hold a few thousand songs, give you room to take a lot of pictures. Remember that this is an 8 megapixel camera, and so the photos you take with it are actually fairly large. So if you take hundreds of photos or you keep lots of photos on there, that's going to take up some space. But I would say that for most people, 32 is a comfortable size. It gives you plenty of room, and 16 is good for people who aren't going to push it.
Yes, Mitch.
I'd like you to comment on NFC and also comment on what are the one or two things that are buzzing around the office that, gee, I wish they would have did this on the iPhone and they didn't.
So was the first question about NFC, near field communication?
Yeah, just the future of that whole thing. And the second one is what's everybody missing that they didn't do?
Sure. So is there anybody in the room who has a question about what NFC is first? I mean, is that something I should just briefly mention?
Yes.
Okay. So there's new technology that's it's been out for, I want to say, at least a decade, where the idea is you have a circuit in your phone or some other handheld gadget that when you go into a store, instead of having to bring your wallet or cash or checkbook or credit cards, you can just hold your phone or whatever that gadget is up to a corresponding gadget on the checkout counter, and it automatically deducts the payment for whatever you're buying. It's been around in Japan and actually somewhat popular there for at least a good 5 or 6 years, if not longer. In the U.S., it hasn't really caught on yet. Some of the Android devices now do have that feature. The big challenge here, I think, is that, for one, your phone has to have NFC hardware. The other one, and this is just as important, is that every business has to install an NFC hardware in their store at every register. So it's a bit like when credit cards first started becoming really popular back in the 70s, when every store had to have some kind of hardware in order to take credit cards. You know, some of you may remember when every store had like one of those little things that you slide the credit card across, and it has the carbon copies and stuff, and they passed it between registers. Well, you'd have to have something like that at every store. So this is, I think, the big reason that it hasn't caught on yet, is that first there weren't phones that had it, and then when now there's phones that have it, there aren't that many stores that have it. Apple's position on this, and they Phil Schiller said, the vice president of product marketing, said this in an interview last week, was that, you know, it just hasn't caught on yet, and we don't think that having something that's going to require not only new phones but also new businesses everywhere, to new hardware and businesses, is going to catch on quick. And so Apple's approach is instead to use this new Passport app, which is debuting this week in iOS 6. And what it is that companies, you can say buy a gift card to Starbucks, and it will show up on your phone as a barcode. Because every store nowadays, not every store, but many stores nowadays have barcode readers. And so you just hold your phone up, they scan your phone screen, and then it deducts from your card. And that's, it's essentially a different way of approaching the same problem. And Apple's argument here is that not only does it not require a lot of new hardware on the business side, but it also means that you don't have to buy a new phone to get it, because any phone that can get iOS 6 now has passcode, or passbook, excuse me. And you can also use it for things like boarding passes, gift cards, rewards programs at supermarkets, and so that's Apple's choice. I think that it's trying to be objective here, and not and think about this for just the average person, and I think it makes a little more sense than NFC right now, given the lack of hardware on both phone and business side. But that's why Apple says they didn't do NFC. So does that answer your NFC question?
Yes.
Did you have one more question?
Yeah, and the hardware question.
Yeah, what was the big buzz about what was missing that you guys would have liked to see?
I don't know, around our offices, I don't know that there were a lot of things that people said, wow, why didn't they do this? The ones that I've seen the most in the tech world, one was NFC, like you said. The other one was wireless charging. That's kind of like the new big gadget. And some of these phones, like Microsoft and Nokia, have this new phone called the Lumia 920 coming out. And it's probably the first wireless charging gadget I've seen yet that looks actually decent. The wireless charging circuitry is actually built into the bottom of the phone. And so you have a charger somewhere in your house, and some new speaker systems and docks and things will also have the feature. So you just rest it on top of there and it charges. The downside to wireless charging is, the main one is that it actually takes a lot longer to charge that way. Inductive charging, it's not nearly as fast as if you plug in an electrical connection. The other is that it's not really wireless. I mean, it sounds like I'm trying to be funny here, but it's true. Anytime there's a wireless charging system, you've got to have hardware on the device that supports it, and the charger itself has to be plugged into a wall somewhere. And so you're kind of like, there's a little gap there that you're jumping wirelessly, but all the rest of it's still wired. And in the past, there's been a bunch of companies who've made wireless charging solutions for the iPhone and the iPod and iPod Touch. And what they did is they made a case that had all the wireless circuitry built in, the wireless charging circuitry, and then a dock that was connected to the wall, and you had to put them together. With this new Nokia Microsoft phone, they've taken away the whole case part, and so instead of having a big bulky case, your phone is just your phone, which is nice. And I think that if somebody's going to do it, that's the way to do it. But it also means that you have to still have a travel charger to take with you that has a big wireless charging base, or they also offer just a standard charging cable, so when you go on the road, you can plug it into the wall and plug it into your phone. So there's still, it's another one of those things where if the infrastructure was there, where houses just magically had wireless charging waves going through them, and you wouldn't have to buy all the extra hardware, it would be kind of cool. But I think we're still not at that point yet. So those are the two features that I've seen the most criticism about with the new iPhone. The third would probably just be that the screen is not big enough when you've got Android phones with 5 or 6 inch screens. I personally I want to be able to pick up my phone with one hand and use it with one hand. And I've tried some of the 5-inch phones and I can't do that. And my pockets aren't that big. So I'm not one of the people who wants to see a big 5-inch phone, but some people really do.
Marilyn?
Yeah, I have a question on Passbook.
Mhm.
I'm going on a trip next week. If I put my boarding pass on my iPhone, can I get on the plane?
Well, depends on the airline right now is the short answer. Some of the airlines do let you do that. They will let you put it on your. In fact, some of the airlines have been doing this for a while, where you could save your boarding pass to your phone and then just scan it when you got to the gate. Some of them are now going to be start using Passbook for this, so that it just immediately goes to your Passbook app as a barcode. If it was me next week, I probably wouldn't chance it. It's hard enough to get on a plane without hassles these days. But eventually, that's the idea: is that you'll be able to just put it on your phone and not have to worry about it.
Thunderbolt, is that only an Apple thing? There don't seem to be many Thunderbolt external drives and stuff like that. Is that because the PCs don't use it?
Thunderbolt's actually an Intel thing. It is an Intel. It is an industry standard that Intel developed. So it is on some Windows PCs, and some Windows PCs you can buy an add-on a card that will give you Thunderbolt. But you're right that it isn't as nearly as popular as USB is right now, and it's mainly because USB is on every computer everywhere, whereas Thunderbolt, like FireWire was when FireWire first started out, is that we're still kind of waiting for more vendors to put it on their machines. And the biggest demand for Thunderbolt is among people who are higher end users that want a lot of more speed, or or Apple users who want to be able to combine several different cords into one cable. And that just hasn't that whole idea of cutting down on cable clutter just has never caught on the other side, I think. But it is an industry standard, and we are seeing more and more Thunderbolt peripherals, but it's still a small number. USB 3 is coming out now, and we're starting to see a lot more of those than Thunderbolt because it's on so many different machines on both Windows and Mac.
I just recently had a problem with the spinning ball on my new Retina display MacBook Pro, and one of the things the Apple Store thought could be causing part of the problem. Well, there were two issues, but one issue was I was using a USB external hard drive, portable hard drive, and they said when working with video, definitely use FireWire or Thunderbolt, and it was the way the information comes over, not so much the speed.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. USB is a little slower. It's also it's asynchronous, so it's got to wait for for most implementations, you've got to wait for the data to get to one side before you can start going back to the other. It's just for video and high bandwidth usage, FireWire and Thunderbolt they're designed differently, and they're really designed for that kind of thing. And so if your apps are waiting for the data to get there, then you can see the spinny beach ball while it waits for data. So I don't know all the specifics of your issue, but that could be part of it.
What about on the MacBook Airs? Will the Pro apps function?
As I mentioned earlier, the MacBook Airs have gotten much faster over the last few years, especially the last 2 years. The current ones, I've got a 27-inch iMac here with lots of RAM and a big hard drive, and I've also got a MacBook Air of the same year. And a lot of things, the MacBook Air actually just feels faster, even though the processor is like half the speed, just because of the way everything's integrated. And it's got the solid state drive and the faster memory. So on some things, the MacBook Air, the horsepower is plenty. The bigger issue, I think, for the Pro apps is that once you start getting into really processor intensive, where it's not so much the speed going from the hard drive to the rest of the system is the bottleneck, but the actual processor itself, that's when the Air starts to feel a little slow. The other issue, I think, with the Air is just that the capacity, the storage capacity is low because they're using these small SSD drives. So, they start out with 128 gigabytes. You can upgrade to 256. The new Retina MacBook Pros can get 512 gigabyte. But if you're doing stuff in Final Cut 10, working with huge video files and stuff, that the bottleneck is often going to be your storage space. You're going to have to rely on external storage for a lot of that stuff, and then you're bringing in other performance issues, the USB 3 or Thunderbolt connections versus the local hard drive. So I would say that if you're a pro running Final Cut 10 or something like that, the Air is probably not your best primary machine. A lot of people I know have an iMac or a Mac Pro, and then they use the Air for their sort of secondary machine, or they just get a MacBook Pro that has, a larger internal storage.
Mitch just recently bought he said that the Air you bought.
Comes with a 512. You can get the 512 SSD in the Air.
Oh, you're right. This year you can. You're right.
Well, can you talk a minute more about the USB 3.0 versus the Thunderbolt and the
FireWire?
FireWire, because I understand it's just as fast as the FireWire.
So it's, in theory, the theoretical bandwidth of USB 3 is faster than, not faster than Thunderbolt, but faster than FireWire. The difference, the bigger issue is that, as I mentioned earlier, USB 3, it's meant to be backwards compatible with older versions of USB, which also used, the way they handle data is not as robust as FireWire. FireWire, I'm oversimplifying here, but FireWire has its own controllers on each end. It can send data directly between two devices asynchronous at the same time. USB has some limitations that FireWire doesn't, and so in real-world tests, if you're doing a lot of stuff that's processor intensive and data intensive, FireWire is still a good, it's still pretty good, if not better than USB 3. They're close now, I think, depending on what you want to do. It used to be USB 2 versus FireWire 800. It wasn't even a contest. Nowadays, USB 3 versus FireWire 800, most people will be fine with USB 3 and getting good performance, if not better. It's just there are certain scenarios where it's probably FireWire still a little better. Thunderbolt is definitely faster and more capable and more robust than USB 3. Again, this is one of those questions where, are you talking about like the pro level user or your everyday Joe or Jane? I think for most people today, USB 3 is great. It's fast. There's more USB devices out there. It's easy to use, and so my MacBook Air has a USB 3, and I haven't bothered to buy a Thunderbolt drive for it because I've been perfectly happy with it.
I'm the only one that seems to be concerned because I'm trying to work with Final Cut Pro 10, and it does seem to make a difference between FireWire and USB 3.
Yeah.
Just about, just exactly what you're saying.
But if you're keeping like an external iTunes library on a drive that uses USB 3 streaming into Apple TV, that should not be an issue.
No, the amount of bandwidth it takes to play music or play movie, you're streaming it, and so as long as your connection can handle that stream, you're fine. And USB 3 is more than enough to handle streaming video or audio.
What about the mini iPad?
Well, what mini iPad? What?
Any feelings on what's going on there?
All the rumors are that Apple's going to have an event next month in October to introduce that. I think that sounds right. I've been using a Google's Nexus 7 since it came out in July, testing one of those. I really like the size. I think there's a definite market there, and I think that it would also let Apple sell an iPad at a lower price point, so they could have a, say $250 iPad Mini or whatever you want to call it. It's a nice size for carrying around. The iPad, which I love, is great for a lot of things, but if I'm sitting in bed trying to read, it gets kind of heavy and it's hard to hold with one hand. That's why I've always been a big Kindle fan for actually reading books and stuff. And so the Nexus 7 that I've been using is a good compromise. It's heavier than a Kindle, but it's got better screen. It's better apps, more apps, or apps I guess I should say. And it's good for just tossing in a bag instead of your full-size iPad. So I think that there are a lot of people who would really like that size. It'd be great for schools, for kids to hold. I help at my daughter's classroom a lot during the week. They have an iPad class every week. And the kids are somewhere in first and second grade. The iPad's actually kind of big and heavy for them. And $400 to basically $800. A little $250 tablet would be great for kids to be able to do the same kind of stuff on. So I definitely think that there's a market there. I think Apple sees that, and so I would be very surprised if these rumors don't come true. I'm looking forward to it.
What was that?
Would they introduce the mini iPad as well as the new iMac at the same time?
Could you repeat that, George? What was that?
Would they introduce the iMac and the new iMac and the new iPad Mini at the same time? Do you think?
They could, the October event is usually in the past has been sort of a music event, but then they combine that with the iPhone event. So they could conceivably make this sort of an education event and have new iMacs, an iPad Mini, iBook kind of stuff all at one, and it could kind of be an education focused event. So I mean, I could see that, and it would let them sneak all these things in before the holidays. We'll see.
Yes, Jerry.
You said that Wednesday is when iOS 6 is going to be released. Is that going to be, is there a time that Apple is defined? And the second question is, how big a download is it going to be?
The last year when Apple announced iOS 5 was shipping, they didn't give any, same as this year, they didn't give a time. At some point during the day, it'll be available through iTunes. You'll be able to force iTunes to check if you connect your phone to iTunes, or you'll be able to force your iPhone to check and it will show up. But if you don't want to go to all that trouble, at some point during the day, you can check your phone and it will say, "Oh, you've got a new update." So it'll happen some point that day. I'm guessing it'll probably be in the morning, and be ready for it to be a slow download because you've got how many tens of millions of people with iPhones, any of whom can try to download it that day. In terms of the size, I don't know. I don't know. There's been developer releases coming out every couple months over the last since WWDC in June actually, and I would guess probably a couple hundred megabytes, maybe 200 or 300. That's my guess.
Anything that's really different about it?
We've talked about a few things like Passbook. They've improved a bunch of things. Mail is better. Safari has gotten some improvements. Siri is supposedly, I think it's finally going to be out of beta with the official release. It's been officially in beta since last year. And they've added other things like sports scores and new data sources so you can ask it more questions. There's probably the biggest new thing in terms of change is Google Maps is no longer the Maps app. It's now an Apple-designed Maps app. So Apple's supplying all the data, all the maps, all the interface, all the features, which means better integration with other apps, and it has turn-by-turn directions now, whereas the Maps app before, it would give you directions, but it wouldn't tell you where to drive. You'd have to buy a third-party, GPS navigation app. So that's built in now. But it's kind of back to a 1.0 program, so we'll see how well it works on first release. So that's probably I think the biggest change is the Maps one. There's some new. I think actually my favorite feature coming into it is we used to always get questions from parents saying, I want to let my kid use my iPad, but I don't want them to be able to switch to other apps or to change things. And there's a new feature called guided access, I think I'm remembering it correctly, where once an app is launched, you can go in and enable this guided access mode. And then for one, it doesn't let you switch out of the app, but also you can actually draw little circles around parts of the screen, and then those parts of the screen are no longer accessible. So you could draw a circle around a settings icon, and then you won't be able to get into there. And it's kind of a cool little feature that it's designed both for young kids and for people who have mobility or accessibility issues, so that you can let them use it without worrying about whether it's going to get quit the app or hit the wrong buttons or whatever. And so that's kind of a cool new feature coming.
Yes, Mitch.
On the absence of removal of Google Maps, do you think there'll be an app coming along to replace that? Because one of the big things you're going to lose is Street View. And I think that's an important thing for a lot of realtors and so on.
Yeah, well, two things, Street View and also transit directions, transit and walking directions, because at least on the initial release, Apple's Maps app doesn't include when you try to get directions from point A to point B, it's only for driving. It doesn't have how to walk there. It doesn't have public transportation, buses, trains, things like that. So yeah, there's things missing from it. The answer to your initial question is that yes, Google has said they are working on their own app, and Apple has hinted that they're welcoming Google to submit this app. So I think that we will see sometime fairly soon a Google Maps app that you can download and install yourself.
Are there any other questions?
The new Mac Pro, be able to use our hard drives and memory from the 2007 model?
The new Mac Pro. Assuming there ever is a new Mac Pro, and I really hope there is. I mean, we hear it from readers all the time that they want a new Mac Pro. I would be very surprised if any new Mac Pro didn't let you use your standard 3.5-inch hard drives and PC cards and things like that. The people who use a Mac Pro are it's a very specific niche of people. And there are people who like lots of hard drive space, who need expandability, who need to be able to install PC cards and things like that. And so it seems to me that if Apple does finally release a new Mac Pro, they've got to include those kinds of backward compatibility, because I mean, people who use a Mac Pro, we're also talking high-end users who buy $10,000 PC expansion cards and things like that. So they're not going to be too happy if the new Mac Pro comes out that everything's soldered to the motherboard and they can't expand. So yeah, I would assume that if Apple does come out with a new Mac Pro, you're going to be able to use some of your old components. The exceptions, of course, would be things that require drivers that don't have Mountain Lion compatible drivers, because of course any new Mac Pro that comes out now is going to only going to be compatible with Mountain Lion.
Thank you.
Mitch.
Back on the credit card issue, is there any rumbling or do you hear anything about the fact that Apple has more credit card numbers in the world than any other vendor, and that would seem to be some kind of an asset that they could easily replace PayPal or come up with something like that, or could use that in the future with some kind of an app that, hey, if you want to charge your card, swipe here. Any thoughts on that? Because 350 million credit cards out there on Apple servers is a lot, and that would seem to be a pretty good asset that they could someday use.
I mean, I think that's probably one of their things they hold closest to the vest, and they're probably the most proud of, is that, yeah, they have hundreds of millions of credit cards and accounts on file. They haven't seemed to show any interest in becoming sort of the next PayPal or whatever. I think to them, PayPal views your credit card information as their primary asset. I think Apple views it as whatever new things we introduce, whatever new features or services we introduce, it just lets us make that easier for you to use. So you don't have to set up a new account and a new website. You don't have to go through the whole process of verifying your credit cards or your bank or whatever. It's just they've already got it. It's your Apple ID, and that's why so many of their features nowadays are dependent on your Apple ID, whether it's the Apple Store, or the Apple Store, the App Store, or the Apple Store, or the iBook Store, iCloud. I mean, you name it. It's all you can. Even in fact, the latest version of the Apple TV software, you can now log in and pay for Netflix and Hulu Plus, those kinds of things, using your Apple ID instead of having to set up a separate account on those particular sites, websites themselves. So for Apple, I think this treasure trove of credit cards information is for them just a way to make it easier to buy other stuff that they want to sell you.
That it? Listen, Dan, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Great magazine.
Thank you. And pardon the bugs on the website this week. We're going to have a little bit of growing pains over the next couple weeks as we get up and running again. And I will make sure to let the newsletter people know that you're waiting for them to start coming again.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.